Hi, I'm Guy Lawrence, and you are listening to the Guy Lawrence podcast. If you're enjoying this content and you want to find out more and join me and come further down the rabbit hole, make sure you head back to guylawrence.com.au. Awesome, guys. Enjoy the show. Anodea, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Guy. Delighted to be here.
I ask everyone on the show every week, if you were stopped on the street by a complete stranger at a bus stop and they asked you what you did for a living, what would you say?
I would say I am an evolutionary activist. And that means I try to awaken and activate the evolutionary impulse in people, the impulse to evolve themselves, to evolve their communities, their world, our planet. I'm an evolutionary activist. In fact, that's what it says on my business card.
Okay, I love it. I love it. And do you think we know that we're our own handbrake to a degree, that there's an evolution within us that we can kind of be missing out on?
Well, I think evolution is always proceeding. No matter what we do, we can get in the way of it or we can go with it. That's our choice. Yeah.
Yeah.
In answer to your question, I'm also a somatic therapist, and I was on an airplane once and someone asked me what I did for a living, and that was my answer at the time. And they said, "What does somatic mean?" I said, of the body. No, I said I was a transpersonal somatic therapist. And then he said, "Oh, does that mean you help people get out of one body and transfer into another person?"
Oh, I love it. Well, so how would you define somatic therapy then?
Well, somatic means of the body. So it's doing psychotherapy through the path of the body. So what's happening in the body, what's opening up, where are you storing your issues in your tissues? It's really working with the body through psychotherapy.
Yeah, okay. Makes sense. And it's interesting. I know we were just speaking quietly off air before, and the fact that we have an energy body and these different parts of trauma we store in the body. Being a Welsh rugby player, that was a very foreign concept to me, right? But then once I actually experienced that energy body and felt a lot of this trauma come out of my body, that I didn't even know was there, was mind-blowing, absolutely mind-blowing.
That's right. And it's in the body, and you can go to a talk therapist and you can talk about it until the cows come home, but that doesn't necessarily heal it unless you involve the body
Itself. Yeah. And so what was your personal journey? Like, how did you start looking? Was there an event or something that made you start looking at this work in the first place?
Well, I was always fascinated with what makes people tick. What are people made of and what makes them be the way they are and do this or do that. And I think that I experienced body somatic therapy, bioenergetic therapy once myself. And it was just such a profound awakening that I said, I have to study this. And so I've always been in psychology, but I've always been with the body as well. I did massage therapy for many years, way back in my 20s. And I've taught yoga for 40 years. And, I've always incorporated the body in what I do.
Got it. Yeah. And how would you define then the energy body? Like, again, because that would have been a foreign concept to me as well at some stage in my life.
Right. Well, we know we have a physical body, and that's made of our muscles and bones and tissues. And, we're looking at each other's physical body right here. But as you're in Australia and I'm in California, I am not touching your physical body here. It's really far away, but the energy is coming through. So we have an energy body that is generated by our physical body. And really, everything is just energy. If you get down to the physical level and you get down to the inside of an atom, it's mostly empty space. So what holds that together is energy. So we have not only our physical body, but a body of energy that supersedes that. It's like a layer. In yoga, they call it a kosha. And you would say it's the pranamaya kosha, it's the layer of energy. And then we have a mind body.
Okay, so and then separate, and then with this work that you teach, is it about them becoming aware of that energy and how to direct it?
Yes,
or move it?
exactly. It's about becoming aware of our energy, how we might have blocked it, or how we can't really, some people have this energy come up and they're very reactive and they have to dump it all over somebody else because they can't contain themselves. So it's becoming aware of what our patterns are with the energy, and then really learning to become the master of that rather than the victim of it.
Yeah, okay. But it's been like for myself, because related to my own journey, it's becoming aware that it exists in the first place, though. Because
That's right.
I didn't even know it was there. And that's why I reached out to you as well, because I saw the title of your book, Charge and the Energy Body. And I was like, oh my God, I've certainly felt a charge of energy go through my body. And over from doing this work, was able to distinguish that there was a physical aspect and an energy aspect as well. I just didn't realize that we could generate a charge of energy within us and really feel it that was as real as the light in the light bulb. Like it's a very tangible thing once we start to learn to work with it.
Yes, it's very tangible, and there are simple exercises you can do to generate that energy in your body.
Yeah. So how do we break this down then? I'm thinking, what stops us from that energy moving in the first place? Is it our lifestyle? Is it our thoughts? Is it habits?
Well, when you're a little child, you're full of energy. Just think of a 2 or a 3-year-old. They're going and going all the time, and there's no inhibition in their energy and expression. But because of that, the parents very quickly say, be quiet, sit still, don't do that. What's the matter with you? You should be ashamed of yourself. Hold it in. And the mind learns to sit on the energy and say, oh, well, I shouldn't let this out. The teacher will get mad, or mommy will get mad. And I have to be a good girl. I have to be a good boy. And we start to contain our energy. Then for most people, there's difficulties that happen, some kind of trauma, some kind of loss. And those have tremendous energy. They impact the energy body. And if that child is not allowed to process that at the time, which is unfortunately more often the case, then it stays stuck in the physical body. And after a while, it can cause physical symptoms, pain, tension, organ imbalance, illnesses, things like that.
Yeah, okay. And how do we, it's really fascinating, because I think about even to this day that we quite often don't process experiences. So in your mind, how do we process an experience in the first place that might be traumatic or something that might go on?
Well, so we have our own energy body, and then all around us is energy. So you interact with someone, I'm interacting with you, our energies are connecting. If you, heaven forbid, did something terrible to me, and then that would have an impact on my energy body. Now, ideally, when something impacts us, it comes up, we feel it, we let it go. It's a charge, and then we discharge. But too often, we're not able to discharge. So when you say, what are we doing when we're processing something? We're actually allowing that energy to move all the way through and express itself the way it was designed to.
Got it. And is that why the title of the book, Charge? Then it's been able to see, as we generate energy, then how we direct it, and I guess follow the pattern all the way through. Would that be a fair way?
Follow the pattern all the way through. And the reason I use charge is because it's a word everybody can relate to. But in yoga, we call it prana. In martial arts and Chinese medicine, we call it qi. Star Wars calls it the force.
Yeah.
And Freud called it libido. Wilhelm Reich called it the orgone energy. Some people call it the biofield or bioenergy. They're all the same thing. I just call it charge because you can use that word with a little kid. Oh, you're all charged up about Christmas, aren't you? Or you're all charged up about going on a trip. Or I can say to a client, you still have a pretty big charge on your ex-husband, don't you? And that person knows immediately what I mean. If I say you still have a lot of prana on that mother issue, it doesn't quite mean the same thing. So we know what it is to have a charge about something, and we know charge when we feel it. In fact, I say that charge, C-H-A-R-G-E, stands for consciousness having a really genuine experience.
Huh. Yeah, beautiful, beautiful. So To start working with that energy then and starting to, what would be the first step? Is it just becoming aware that it's there, like learning to feel it?
Well, when I'm working with a client, for example, and they're talking about something that happened to them this week or something that happened in their childhood or whatever they're talking about that is an issue for them, I'll say, so where do you feel that in your body? You know, or I'll say, do you feel a charge when you talk about that? So they could be talking about a car accident they had 10 years ago, and I'm wanting to know if there's still charge there or not. So I'll say, do you feel a charge? And what I mean is some kind of activation in the body. It could be quickening of the breath. It could be a little tightening in the belly. Sometimes it's a clenching of the jaw, a narrowing of the eyes. Sometimes it can feel like a cup of coffee just went off in your belly, you know, you've got just a little more energy, and that's kind of a mild form of it. Other people can, you know, feel a huge charge when they stumble upon some memory or they talk about something, and that charge might be sadness, they want to cry. It might be anger, they want to get angry. It might be fear. Fear is a big charge. Charge can be excitement. We have sexual charge, you know, when someone is turned on, they have a sexual charge, and that comes up to the point of orgasm and then is released. So there's all kinds of ways, positive and negative, or we frame it as positive and negative, that charge takes place. I think charge is neutral, but we say, oh, it's not okay to be afraid, or it's not okay to be sad, and we make it negative. It's actually just energy wanting to move through the body.
Got it. And us, especially in the Western society, tend to suppress that as opposed to processing it, like we spoke to it. Is that where the problem starts to begin? What happens if we continue to resist that charge that wants to come through us? Because it might be in the form of fear or anxiety, and we just keep suppressing it. What generally tends to happen?
Well, the body is a storage battery for charge. And so if you have a lot of charge come up that you can't process or release, you have to make a bigger body to store it in. We call that body armor. It could take the form of extra weight. It could take the form of very dense muscles or rigidity, where people aren't very flexible, things don't move very well anymore. It could take the form of aches and pains, or even illness, or skin diseases, or things, you know, irritations, things like that. So it'll show up in the body in some way when it's blocked. And people who have to make a really big body, I know by looking at that person, they had to sit on a lot of charge in their life.
Yeah, got it. And what do you think then happens as we start to become aware of the charge and start to work with it and start to look and address it? Is it almost like, if you found working with clients, they start to grasp it, get the hang of it, and then they get like an aha moment, go, oh wow, and start to move through it, and then maybe it will tip their psychology in a much more curious way to start looking at these things in the first place?
Well, yes, when my students or clients really understand the concept of charge, they have a whole new way to look at themselves and their interactions with others and other people. And they have a way to understand to get a handle on what's going on. So ultimately what I teach is for people to learn to harvest the charge. And what I mean by harvesting it is that you don't suppress it, you don't block it off, and you don't have to discharge it, meaning I don't have to cry for 3 days, I don't have to yell at you, I don't have to, you know, get frozen in fear, I don't have to dump my energy on somebody. I can harvest it into the cells and tissues of my body in a way that isn't blocked, but is flowing. So I get to have it, because charge is golden. It's our life force. We want it, but it's not comfortable when it's blocked up.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense for sure. So I get a lot of people come to me who listen to the podcast and come through, and there's normally pain is the main derivative that drives someone to want to create change and start looking at this. They might have been, I don't know, on a path or a psychology path or whatever it might be, and they're still hitting roadblocks. So they start to look at this. That's what I'm finding. And some of the common denominators are anxiety and depression, constantly feeling anxious or constantly feeling low energy. And the other one is normally has had a traumatic experience and can't move past it. So
yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to say, I'd love to dive into them a little bit deeper and start to break them down. I know there's 3 things I mentioned there.
Oh, those are very important, all 3 of them, and they're really important to understand in terms of the charge. So very simply, anxiety is too much charge. And it actually comes from the Latin root angere, which means to choke or constrict. So when we tighten the body and constrict, then the charge can't come through and it feels shaky and like anxiety. I have too much energy. I don't know what to do. I can't think. I can't sit still. You know, my heart's beating. I can't take a deep breath. That's anxiety. In short, it's too much charge, too much. Depression is too little. Oh, I don't have enough energy to get out of bed. I can't do anything. Everything's so much work. I'm tired. I'm sluggish. Those are the feelings of depression. Now, in actual fact, in depression, there is charge, but it's repressed. It's pushed down. It's locked up. And when the charge is locked up in the body, we don't have access to it. So it feels like we don't have any energy. And, you know, this is the state to some degree of most of humanity, or there wouldn't be such a popularity in coffee shops, you know, trying to open us up to more charge.
Totally.
Now, trauma is a little bit of a different animal, but it's very related to the handling of charge. In trauma, well, first of all, when something threatens you, your body is going to flood with charge in order to be able to either flee, run away from the threat, or to fight it off. You know, somebody comes out, a bully comes out of the class hallway, and you're alone in the hallway and you're a little kid, and that bully's bigger than you are. Your heart's going to race, your breath is going to come faster, charge is going to just come racing through your system, so you can either run away from the bully or fight him off. Now, if you run away or successfully fight off your attacker, everything goes back to normal and you're fine. No trauma there. What happens, trauma is when an instinctual response to protect ourselves begins in the nervous system and doesn't get to complete. And all that charge that arises gets frozen, it gets stuck. And it gets, you know, we freeze at a high charge level. It's like, you know, you're going too fast in a car, all of a sudden there's a very sharp corner, you realize it at the last moment, you're going too fast and you hit the brakes, things spin out of control, right? And so trauma is when the nervous system hits the brakes of too much charge arising too fast and nowhere to go with it. I'm too little to fight this guy off. There's nowhere to run to. So trauma is when really something bad happens and we can't do anything about it. But the instinct to do something about it gets frozen and locked in a high charge. And then it gets severed from consciousness. Often we forget completely. People don't remember what happened before the car accident. They don't remember what happened when they were abused because it's too much for consciousness to tolerate. Now, in healing trauma, you can understand it, and that's an important part, but the real healing comes when you can let that charge out a little bit at a time so that someone stays safe from becoming overwhelmed and they can release it like a pressure cooker a little bit at a time. And when the charge is released, the trauma is gone.
Beautiful. Yeah, that makes complete sense. So how do we start to release that?
Well, first you have to notice it. First you have to learn that it's there. So next time you're in a situation, even when you're excited or happy about something, that's charge. Go, where do I feel that in my body? Where do I feel the activation? Is my heart beating faster? Is my tummy clenching? Am I, you know, just feeling breathing deeper? Or when you get, say, triggered. Most people who are in a relationship have some time when they get triggered by their partner. right? The partner says
Oh,
or
yeah.
does something, and all of a sudden there you are feeling abandoned or feeling angry or misunderstood or whatever it is. I think most people can relate to that. That means you've got a charge going in that moment. So I encourage people to stop if they can. Just say, oh, I need a minute, time out, feel what they're feeling. And instead of going around about the issue, oh, you said that and you did this, go, what am I feeling in my body? Where is the activation in my body? And what does it want to do? Because what happens is the activation comes up and then our habits, they slam it down at the same time. A really good example of this is I'll be working with someone and they'll be talking about some issue from their childhood. All of a sudden, their voice gets really tiny and you can just tell they're constricting in their throat. And consciousness is just locking down on what wants to come out. And they aren't doing this on purpose. They don't want to do it. Or someone can't get a deep breath and they want to, but the tension over the chest is just too much. Or the belly tightens in a hard ball and they don't digest their food very well. These are involuntary reactions. So what I do is I have a person look at, so what are you doing in your body to block it? Oh, I'm tightening my shoulders. I'm gripping my jaw. I'm clenching my fists. These are kind of things we might do. And it may seem counterintuitive, but I say, can you do that more? Because what it is an unconscious response. By becoming conscious of it and doing it a little bit more, exaggerating it, we really bring it to consciousness and we let that instinctual pattern finish. And then when it's finished, it can go away and it can let go of the charge.
Interesting. And it's literally, I can envisage it now, like you said, like the pressure cooker. If you start to become aware and given that opportunity to release that energy as it comes, and almost not buy into the feelings, because I'm guessing when that charge starts to come, sometimes a response might be anger, it might be frustration, and we've really got to sort of observe it as opposed to keep habitually repeating the same patterns.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Charge will move up against a block. It'll move through the body where it's free until it finds a block, and then it'll be knocking on that door. Can I get through the block? Hey, let me through. But we tend to go, uh-oh, somebody's trying to come in. I'm going to bolt the door. And then the charge says, oh, no, I'm coming through. And then we go another bolt, and then we put a chair by the door. And so it gets bigger and bigger. When charge is pushing up against a block, it's very uncomfortable. And I call that the edge of the comfort zone. And you don't actually help somebody by pushing them over their comfort zone, but by expanding the comfort zone. That way they have more room for themselves, but they're still comfortable. Yeah. So by exaggerating the block and then very slowly, like that fast, releasing it, that slowness of releasing it allows the charge to permeate in a way that happens because it's slow. We can expand our comfort zone and still be comfortable.
Got it. And it comes back to feeling safe, like you said earlier. Yeah. As opposed to, I've jumped way out past my comfort zone a few times and it didn't do me any favors.
It doesn't. What happens when you go over your comfort zone is you get more uncomfortable. And when you get more uncomfortable, the defenses get stronger.
Yes.
So as a therapist, I don't want to strengthen the defenses. Yeah.
So I got to ask you this question because it's more of a personal question, but how does the charge relate with the energy centers? Because I must have listened to your book on the chakra systems about 3 or 4 times, and every time I listen to it on Audible, I get something completely different from it. Oh. and the anatomy around it is fascinating. So are you able to just tie in a little bit of the bows?
Oh, well, sure. Well, my lifetime work with the chakra system and teaching people about the chakras and leading them through yoga and bioenergetic exercises, combined with my work as therapist, is what taught me to really understand charge at the core of everything. And so the chakras are energy centers. They handle the charge. In fact, my definition of a chakra is that it is an organizational center for receiving charge, for assimilating it, for storing it, and for releasing it or expressing it.
Okay.
So if someone's listening to this podcast, they're receiving the words right now. They're assimilating it. They go, oh, that makes sense. Oh, that doesn't. Oh, I can relate to that. That's assimilation. They're storing it. Maybe they're making notes somewhere. They're storing it in their notebook, or they're storing it in their memory. And then maybe after it's done, somebody says, oh, what were you listening to? And they tell them about it. Then they're expressing it. So these 4 functions is what a chakra does on each of 7 different levels.
Right. So it's almost, I kind of, in my own thinking, was almost like they're like reservoirs, and they distribute the energy then throughout the body, depending
That's
on.
right. And each one handles a different kind of energy. So we take in food and we assimilate it. We break it into vitamins and minerals and calories. And if we eat too much, we store it. And then we exercise and we burn it up. So that's like on the food level. We do that with the breath. We take in breath and we distribute that through the body, and we exhale, and we can hold our breath if we want to. We take in words, we take in images, we take in thoughts, we take in love, so we take in on each of these levels and process and release.
Yeah. Okay. And then I'm thinking about the frozen stored energy as well. Like, for instance, I've always used the example, because when I started looking at this work, I really felt a block of energy in my throat, and I had no idea why, what was going on. I didn't. And then as I started looking at this work, I realized I wasn't speaking my own truths. Like, I wasn't living by it. And it was just all started to make so much sense once I got it. And once I started to feel that energy physically start to move through that area, I was like, wow, I'm all in now. Like, I really started to get it. So
yeah, that's exactly it.
Yeah. So with this thing then, should we be exploring the energy centers to accommodate the charge in us if we have a traumatic experience, or if we are suffering from anxiety or depression? Is that where we kind of go to help align our charge?
Well, it's a map for understanding the architecture of the human soul.
Oh, so, wow. Okay. Yeah.
Your soul experienced what you've experienced in this lifetime, and your soul handled it however it handled it, for better or for worse. If you were 3 years old, you handled it with the tools of a 3-year-old. If you were 10 years old, you handled it with the skills of a 10-year-old. And if you're 30, you handle it with adult skills. But the chakras describe the architecture of the soul. So it's a way to understand yourself. So if you always get problems in your belly, for example, or your digestion, well, that's your 3rd chakra. So you can go back and say, well, how was my power programmed? Maybe my father was very authoritarian and I had to really contain my power. Or maybe nobody was taking care of me and I had to take care of brothers and sisters. So I had to really beef my power up at a young age in order to be safe. Or, maybe you weren't allowed to speak your truth, as you say, in some crucial situation. So that's still waiting to come out. And then that means in your adult life, there's other situations, relationships and work, where you might not be able to speak your truth because we put a block there in the 5th chakra. So the chakra system helps us understand, if I feel this in my chest, well, that's heart chakra. If I feel it in my belly, that's 3rd chakra. And each of them have a meaning and also developmental stage of life. So we can start to put together, this is because this happened to me then. And this is the lesson I took from that, but that's not necessarily true. And here's how I can heal it.
Right. Do you think we need to know in the first place what happened to move it, or not?
It makes life easier, but it isn't crucial. I have worked with people just moving the charge, and that brings them relief, even if they don't know exactly what it was related to. So often people don't have memories, especially if they're very early childhood, like their birth or their first couple years of life. Very few people can really remember anything from that, but it's still in the body. And so I can still work with it, even if they don't know exactly what happened.
Amazing. Absolutely amazing. The wisdom of the body is just blows my mind.
Mine too. Mine too. Yeah.
And it's like the more I get out of the way and give it the space to do its thing, the quickening it can happen.
That's
But
right.
I often find myself constantly getting in the way with my own habits, rituals, and thoughts, and so forth.
Well, we all do. It's just because it's frightening in a way to let that charge all the way through.
Yeah.
And you had a full experience of it. So, it can be blissful, but it can also be a little unsettling and a little frightening.
I was terrified and excited all in the one thing. It was quite amazing, actually.
Yeah.
It was quite amazing. Yeah. But once you have an experience like that, what it did for me mentally, emotionally, and physically was so much, because it really sort of broke down some fundamental belief systems that I'd grown up with that I didn't even realize that were there.
That's right.
And then it made me ask more questions and become more curious about life. And it almost dissolved a lot of fear that I didn't even know I was living in, if that makes sense.
Yeah, sure. It totally makes sense.
And
well, when the charge moves through, it dissolves the blockages. And when we're afraid, we block things up.
Yeah, it's incredible. And of course, from that, there's definitely a element now where I know it's like I can feel a flow come through me, and there's a creative element and things are just working. And it's like I've learned to know when I'm in flow and when I'm out flow, and it's much more easier for me to read now. And then I can actually adjust my approach each day to adapt accordingly. If I'm feeling a bit flat, then I can lift myself back up. Or if I'm feeling overexcited, it's okay, slow it down. And it's almost like this congruent line in between both sides that you can kind of always come back to.
Well, that's beautiful, because that's what I mean by becoming the master of your own charge.
Okay.
You know how to contain it when it's too much, and you know how to perk it up when it's too little.
Yeah. Well, do you have any habits or rituals that you do on a daily or weekly basis to kind of work with it?
Well, sure. And like anybody, there's days I do and days I don't, but certainly I meditate every day. I've been a meditator for 45 years. And I just kind of open my crown chakra and let the energy pour in and just kind of run through, sort of like taking a shower, where you just stand in the water and you let it pour over you and you get clean. Well, I just let it pour down the inside of me, and it just kind of clears my whole core and all my chakras. So that's a meditation. I do yoga, I do breathing exercises, I do some bioenergetic exercises. I do tapping sometimes, if I'm a little sluggish and I have to do an interview or something, then I can just do some quick tapping on certain points, and that'll perk my energy up. I like to exercise. That's usually good for my charge.
Yeah, totally. Beautiful. Yeah. Look, I've got a set of questions I ask everyone on the show, and I'd love to tap into them a little bit. And the first one is, what's been a low point in your life but later in life turned out to be a blessing?
Oh, wow. Well, I would say I've had a lifelong battle with Lyme disease, which you might not know in Australia, but it's a very serious, disease that's hard to cure. And so that's made me very aware of my body. And there were times I thought it would never shift. And certainly doing a lot of yoga and breathing exercises and everything has kept me on my feet and traveling around the world teaching workshops, when most people that have, the condition I have or can't get out of bed. So that's, I suppose, been a low point. And then what was your question? How did I resolve it? Or
a low point, but it's been a blessing.
Oh, but it's a blessing. And it's been a great teacher. I think chronic illness, and in fact, tragedy in general, is a teacher, if we can see it as such. And it's been a great teacher for me to be very sensitive to my environment, to learn boundaries, to learn self-care, to pay attention to my diet, to, have to take care of myself. When I was young, I could stay up all night and eat what I wanted, and it didn't matter. And, I really wasn't very conscious at that time. Now I have to be more conscious. So it's been a profound teacher.
Yeah, beautiful. Thank you for sharing. What does your morning routine look like?
Well, that I just described. I meditate.
Straight up meditate first thing in
No,
the
not
morning?
straight up. I wake up a little groggy. I like to have a cup of tea with my partner. We sit on the couch and we read the news or listen to a podcast or something, and we moan and groan about the state of the world. And then we get out our yoga mats and we do yoga together. And then I go and meditate and, do a few things. I have a passion for gardening. So in the good weather, I garden. I go out and visit my garden, and usually just to visit means I'm out there an hour pulling weeds or clipping or something. But that's my connection with nature. And then I get to work.
Yeah, beautiful, beautiful. And last question: if you could have dinner with anyone tonight from any time frame and anywhere in the world, who springs to mind and why?
Carl Jung.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah, I think he's just brilliant. He brought spirituality into psychology and has such a deep understanding of the human psyche that I would sit at his feet and, I'd love to speak with him. I think Sri Aurobindo is another one because he worked with a downward current of consciousness coming into the body. Really, there's so many. But Carl Jung comes to mind as a number one.
Yeah, awesome. And what was the name of the second person you mentioned?
Who did I say? I can't remember who I said now. I've totally forgotten it.
That's all right. That's all right. It'll come back once we start talking. And with everything that we've covered today, is there anything you'd like to leave our listeners to ponder on?
Well, I would just like to say that this life force that I'm talking about and calling charge is golden. Don't waste it and don't tie it up. Allow it to come into your body. It is a profound healing force, and it has an intelligence. It has a wisdom, like the body has a wisdom. So what we want to do is meet it. We want to embrace it. The first thing we want to say, oh, there's my life force. Even if it's choking me in the throat, there's my life force, and befriend it. And then that's the start of learning to heal with charge.
Yeah, beautiful. And I do believe, I haven't mentioned it in the podcast yet, but you're coming to Australia.
I am in November. I'll be teaching in Brisbane and Melbourne.
Brisbane and Melbourne, beautiful. Is it like a 1 day, 2 day workshop?
I'm teaching a weekend workshop in each place. I'm also teaching a 5-day in New Zealand. And all of that is on my website, AnodeaJudith.com.
Beautiful. I'll be sure to link to the show notes. And is your book Charge available here in Australia to order?
I think it is. Yeah. I know. It's produced. In all the English-speaking countries. So. Yeah,
beautiful. Beautiful. Well, look, like I said, I'll link to everything in the show notes. If people are listening to this in audio, they can just hit the pause on the podcast, scroll down, and there'll be links there straight away. So, Anodea, I just want to thank you for coming on the show today. Honestly, people like yourself make this work make so much sense for somebody like me as well, that has been having experiences and needed to know what's been going on and being able to relate to it. So, thank you for coming on and sharing your wisdom and putting it out there, because it really helps. It certainly helped me, that's for sure.
Oh, wonderful. Well, thank you, Guy, for the opportunity. Thank you for doing the podcasts and bringing this information to people around the world.
Yeah, you're welcome. Thanks, Anodea.